I never expected heartbreak to arrive on an ordinary Tuesday morning, but that's how life tends to deliver its hardest blows, quietly, without warning. The day my daughter Alyssa called me from overseas, everything inside me shifted. Her voice, once warm and honey-sweet, was cold enough to frost glass. "Mom, listen. Evan and I talked. Europe is better for us. The apartment, the beach house, everything you and Dad had? We sold it. We needed the money. You'll manage, right? You've always survived." And then the line went dead. Not a goodbye. Not a thank you. Not even a pause to let me breathe. I remember sitting in that stiff plastic chair at the clinic, staring at the poster about heart health while the doctor's assistant called my name. But I didn't hear anything, not the nurse, not the chatter around me, not even my own heartbeat. It felt as if the world had pressed mute. When I finally stood up and walked home, my legs moved without direction, the way they used to when Richard and I took long walks after dinner. But he wasn't here anymore. And now, it seemed, neither was Alyssa. I walked into my bedroom, dropping my purse onto the bedspread Richard and I had shared for over 30 years. Something tugged at me, an old memory, faint but persistent. 3 days before Richard passed, he had handed me a sealed manila envelope. "Marianne," he'd whispered, voice fragile but still carrying that warm certainty of his, "don't open this until you feel ready. And when you do, trust me." I had tucked it away in my dresser drawer and, drowned in grief, forgotten. But now I felt ready. My hands trembled as I pulled the envelope out. The edges were crisp, untouched. I sat down, letting the dim evening sunlight spill across the covers. The house felt too quiet, almost expectant. I opened it. Inside were documents, thick ones with embossed seals, bank certificates, property deeds, far more than I expected. But the letter was what made my breath stop. "My dearest Marianne," Richard had written in his unmistakably neat handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means you're carrying a weight you shouldn't be carrying. Everything we built, everything we saved, it's yours. Not just the beach house. The company in your name owns every property. The accounts are in your name. You are the sole owner. You've been stronger than you know. And now, you must be wiser than ever." I felt the room tilt. My daughter had sold what wasn't hers. Evan had taken advantage of her, and perhaps even forced her into decisions she didn't fully understand. But the truth was simple. I was not the poor, helpless widow my daughter believed I was. I was the legal owner of everything. And I had just discovered the power to take it all back. A calm, unfamiliar certainty settled inside me. This wasn't revenge. It was justice, gentle, patient, deliberate. Tomorrow, I would visit a lawyer. Tonight, I would let myself breathe. But the game had quietly begun. What would Alyssa do if she discovered her mother wasn't the helpless woman she thought, but the silent owner of everything she destroyed? Marianne's first strategic move. Morning sunlight poured across my kitchen counter as I sipped bitter coffee I didn't really taste. The envelope Richard left me was spread open in front of me, its documents neatly stacked the way he always organized paperwork. I almost laughed thinking about how many nights he spent telling me, "Marianne, you should know these things. You never know when life decides to test us." Life was testing me now. I dialed the number Richard had scribbled in the corner of his letter. A firm, deep voice answered on the second ring. "This is Callahan and Wilkes Law Office. How may I direct your call?" "My name is Marianne Brooks," I said quietly. I need to speak with Mr. Callahan. My husband left instructions." Seconds later, the line clicked, and a familiar voice, steady, warm, a bit weathered, came through. "Marianne? This is Henry Callahan. Richard told me you might call one day." His words hit me harder than expected. Richard had known everything. He'd prepared for everything. Even this. Henry asked me to come to his office immediately. I expected some small, dusty legal office with faded carpets and old water dispensers, but what I saw when I arrived stunned me. marble floors, modern glass doors, receptionists typing away in perfect rhythm. This wasn't a small-town practice, this was a full-scale legal empire. A young intern escorted me to a spacious office lined with mahogany shelves and awards. Behind the desk sat Henry Callahan, older now, but sharp-eyed, with the posture of a man who still ran marathons. "Marianne," he said, rising to shake my hand. "I'm honored that Richard trusted me with his final wish." Final wish. The phrase felt like a stone pressing against my chest. Henry motioned for me to sit. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a second sealed envelope, this one with my name, written in Richard's bold handwriting. My throat tightened. "He gave this to me 2 years ago," Henry explained. "Said you'd need it when the time came." I opened it slowly. Inside was a single page. "If our daughter ever acts out of desperation, protect her from her own mistakes, but protect yourself first." Tears pricked my eyes. Richard had foreseen everything: Alyssa's impulsive nature, her hunger for stability, her tendency to trust too quickly, especially men like Evan. Henry let me read in silence before clearing his throat. "Marianne, let me explain the situation in practical terms." He tapped a folder on his desk. "Your husband transferred every property, asset, and account into your name long before he passed. Even the business shares your daughter thinks she sold, those transactions are void. They were never legally hers to sell." "Void?" I repeated, stunned. He nodded. "Legally, you still own it all. Every last piece." I leaned back, the truth settling over me like a heavy blanket. Alyssa and Evan had celebrated victory far too soon. "But," Henry continued, his tone shifting, "I suspect you didn't come here just to know the truth. You want to know what to do with it." He was right. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to hurt my daughter. I wanted her to understand consequences, responsibility, and the sharp edges of choices made too quickly. "What do you suggest?" I whispered. Henry folded his hands. "First step, freeze all assets quietly. Let them feel the loss before they understand the lesson." A strange mix of fear and power stirred inside me. Maybe for the first time in years. I wasn't afraid. But when Marianne freezes everything, how will Alyssa and Evan react when their perfect life abroad suddenly falls apart? The first domino didn't fall with a dramatic crash. It fell quietly, like a soft click echoing through an empty room. Henry assured me the financial freeze would take 24 hours to fully activate. I spent that day pacing my living room, replaying the last conversation with my daughter over and over again. "You'll manage, right? You've always survived." Yes, I had survived. But surviving and being stepped on were not the same thing. Richard had made sure I understood that difference now. By the next morning, the storm had begun. My phone buzzed nonstop, missed calls, messages, frantic voice memos. I didn't answer any of them. I simply watched the screen light up again and again with the same name. Alyssa. Then, finally, a call came from an international number. I let it ring until the last moment and then answered. "Mom." Alyssa's voice cracked. "Our accounts, everything's locked. Evan went to pay rent and the card got declined. The bank said there's a hold on all transfers, even the money from the property sales." "What's happening?" I kept my tone steady. "It means the money wasn't yours to use, sweetheart." "What? What are you talking about? You sold properties that legally belong to me." "Not you. Not Evan." Silence. Not the stunned kind, but the quiet that comes right before a storm. "Mom, please tell me this is a mistake." "It's not." She sucked in a sharp breath, the sound trembling. "Evan said everything was fine. He said the paperwork was clean." "Are you saying I broke the law?" "You participated in an unauthorized sale, yes." A soft, strangled sob escaped her. I closed my eyes, forcing myself not to soften. "Not yet." "Mom," she whispered, "why didn't you tell me you still owned everything?" Because you never asked, I replied. You just took. Her breath hitched again. I wasn't angry, I was devastated. But devastation had finally opened my eyes. While I spoke to Alyssa, another call came through. Evan. Persistent, aggressive, every bit the man Richard warned me about without ever saying his name. I let it go to voicemail. Marianne, his voice snarled, call me back now. This freeze is illegal. I'll fight you on this. Illegal? The irony nearly made me laugh. After the call with Alyssa ended, I went straight to Henry's office again. He had already printed out fresh updates. Just as expected, he said, handing me a stack of reports. The freeze triggered safely. They have no access to any funds. Their rent is past due, their travel cards aren't working, and the buyer of the beach house is requesting proof of ownership because they received a legal notice. Will Alyssa be okay? I asked softly. Henry didn't flinch. She will be. But she needs to fall before she can understand why. I knew he was right. Protecting her didn't mean shielding her from consequences. Sometimes the most painful lessons were the ones that restored people. As I stood to leave, Henry added, one more thing, Marianne. Evan is going to fight back harder than you think. He's not worried about Alyssa, he's worried about losing access to your money. Don't underestimate him. I nodded, a chill running through me. Richard had prepared me for this. Henry was guiding me through it. And now, Alyssa would need to learn from it. But Evan? He was about to discover he chose the wrong mother to manipulate. Link rehook, end of part 3. What happens when Evan tries to retaliate, and Marianne finally sees his true intentions with her own eyes? I always believed you could hear a person's true nature in their silence. And the silence that followed Evan's voicemail, the one that ended in a low, furious growl, told me everything I needed to know about the man my daughter had married. It wasn't love fueling him. It was fear. Fear of losing control, and losing access to the wealth he thought he had snatched from a grieving widow. By late afternoon, the doorbell rang. Not a polite chime. Not a hesitant press. 3 hard, deliberate knocks. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. When I opened the door, Evan stood there in a tailored coat, jaw clenched, eyes bloodshot. His appearance was polished, but everything beneath it was unraveling. Marianne, he said, forcing a tight smile, we need to talk. I believe everything that needed to be said was handled by the bank, I replied. He exhaled sharply, pushing past me before I could stop him. I didn't bother resisting, I simply stepped aside and watched him pace my living room as though he owned it. Do you have any idea what you've done? He snapped. We're stranded in a foreign country. Our accounts are frozen, our rent is overdue, and the landlord already threatened eviction. Then perhaps you shouldn't have spent money that wasn't yours, I said calmly. His head whipped toward me. Alyssa is your daughter. She deserves support. She deserves honesty, I corrected. Something you've never given her. His face darkened, and for the first time, I saw him drop the charming mask he wore around Alyssa. The smooth-talking, polite facade evaporated. You were supposed to fade into the background, he spit out. Just retire quietly. Maybe move to assisted living. Not interfere in your daughter's future. The audacity of the words didn't shock me, what shocked me was how naturally they came out of him. As if he had planned this. As if Richard's passing had been an opportunity, not a tragedy. Evan, I said slowly, my daughter didn't fall in love with a good man. She fell for a strategist. A manipulator. Call it what you want, he snapped. Alyssa is mine now. And with her comes everything she inherited. She inherited nothing, I said, my voice firm but steady. Not the properties. Not the accounts. Not the shares. All of it was moved into my name years ago. His expression froze. You're lying. I have the documents, I replied. And the law on my side. He stepped closer, too close. Unfreeze the accounts. No. His jaw ticked. His hands curled into fists. You're making a mistake. You're pushing Alyssa away. Alyssa pushed herself away, I said softly. With your help. I'm simply correcting the damage. He scoffed, letting out a humorless laugh. You think you're strong now because you got a lawyer and a few documents? I've handled bigger obstacles than old women with inheritance complexes. I didn't flinch. Not this time. Not anymore. Then I suppose, I said with a small, calm smile, you won't be surprised when the legal notice for fraud reaches you in Europe. His face drained of color. You wouldn't dare. I would, I said. And I already have. Evan stepped back as if I had struck him. His breathing grew shallow. For the first time since he arrived, fear, not anger, filled his eyes. He realized he was no longer negotiating with a grieving widow. He was negotiating with the owner of everything he tried to steal. And she wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. But Evan isn't the only one who panics. Alyssa soon makes a shocking call that forces Marianne to confront a truth she isn't ready to face. After Evan stormed out of my house, slamming the door behind him, the silence that followed didn't feel peaceful. It felt fragile. As if the air itself was waiting for the next fracture, the next emotional blow to land. I didn't have to wait long. My phone vibrated on the table, Alyssa's name flashing across the screen. I expected anger, accusations, maybe hysterics. What I heard instead made my heart twist painfully. Mom? Her voice was soft, too soft. Are you alone? Yes, I said cautiously. Are you okay? There was a pause, a long, shaky one, and then a sound I hadn't heard since she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. Alyssa was crying. Mom. I don't know what to do, she whispered. We have nothing. We can't pay for the apartment. Evan keeps yelling. He blames me for everything. He says I ruined our future. She sniffed hard, swallowing back a sob. Maybe I did. My chest tightened. Anger at Evan flared through me again, but beneath that anger was something deeper, older, my instinct to protect my child, even from her own choices. Alyssa, I said gently, none of this is your fault alone. You were misled. And pressured. No, she said quickly. Mom. I knew the money wasn't really mine. Her confession hit me like a cold wave. I told myself you didn't need it anymore, she continued in a trembling voice. I told myself you'd be taken care of by the government, by insurance, by anyone except me. I didn't want the responsibility. Evan said selling everything was normal, that families do it all the time. Families don't sell things behind each other's backs, I said softly. And they certainly don't leave their mother with nothing. I know, she whispered. I know now. And I'm trapped here. I don't even have enough for a plane ticket home. I closed my eyes. There it was, the truth beneath all the chaos. Alyssa wasn't just panicking about the money. She was panicking because her marriage, her illusions, and her lifestyle were collapsing all at once. Has Evan hurt you? I asked quietly. No, she said quickly. Not physically. But his words, her voice cracked again. He scares me, Mom. I felt something inside me shift, an old instinct rising like a wave. Richard used to call it my lioness moment. Protective. Fierce. Unshakable. Alyssa, I said, steady and calm, listen to me. You need to leave that apartment. Right now. Pack your passport, a coat, and anything essential. Go to a hotel lobby. Somewhere public. I don't have money for a hotel. You won't need a room. Just a safe place. She inhaled shakily. Mom, are you angry with me? Yes, I admitted, but I still love you. That hasn't changed. Hearing that was her breaking point. She sobbed openly now, no longer hiding the fear. I'm sorry, she cried. Mom, I'm so sorry. My eyes stung with tears. We'll fix this. But first, you need to get away from Evan. I'll try, she whispered. But he's watching me. He thinks you'll give in if he keeps pushing. I won't, I said. Not this time. She breathed out slowly, a tiny exhale of relief. Okay. I'll call you when I'm out. And then the line went dead. I sat very still, the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. Alyssa wasn't innocent. But she was still my daughter, and now she was tangled in a mess she didn't know how to escape. And Evan? He wasn't just a greedy husband anymore. He was a threat. But as Alyssa tries to leave, she discovers something in Evan's belongings, something that exposes a bigger scheme than Marianne ever imagined. Alyssa didn't call back for almost an hour. I kept checking the screen, pacing my living room in small, tight circles. Every worst-case scenario flashed through my mind, Evan yelling, grabbing her phone, stopping her from leaving. Finally, at exactly 8:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Alyssa calling. I answered instantly. Alyssa? Are you safe? I'm outside, she whispered, breathless. I'm walking toward the metro station. Evan's still in the apartment, but he'll realize soon. Relief washed through me. Good, I said. Stay in public areas. Don't look back. I won't, she whispered. Then her voice shifted slightly, confused, hesitant. Mom, something happened before I left. My heart stopped for a second. What do you mean? She lowered her voice. When I went into the bedroom to grab my passport, I found something. Found what? A folder. Stuffed inside one of Evan's laptop bags. It must have fallen open when he tossed the bag earlier. Mom, you need to hear this. I could hear her footsteps on the pavement, the echo of cars, the rush of people nearby. But her voice carried something different now, fear mixed with disbelief. I saw documents with your name on them, she continued. Not my name. Not his. Yours, Mom. It looked like ownership papers? Property transfer drafts? And there were notes scribbled in Evan's handwriting. My stomach tightened. What kind of notes? She took a shaky breath. He wrote timelines. Steps. His own checklist. Things like gain daughter's trust, encourage selling assets, move mother to assisted care, and, she choked mid-sentence. Mom, he even wrote the word guardianship. Underlined. My blood ran cold. Guardianship. The legal power to control my assets. My decisions. My life. Alyssa, I said slowly, are you telling me Evan intended to take legal control over me? Yes, she whispered, breaking. Mom, he wanted you declared mentally unfit. He had drafts of letters he never sent, about you being forgetful, unstable, needing help. My hands trembled. A wave of nausea forced me to sit down. Richard had warned me, indirectly, quietly, through his preparations. But even he couldn't have known how far Evan planned to go. Alyssa's voice cracked. Mom. I helped him without knowing. I trusted him. I thought. This is not your fault, I interrupted firmly. Manipulators hide their plans behind affection. Evan used you. But Mom, she whispered, he knew exactly how to pull me in. He told me you were stuck in the past, that you didn't understand finances anymore. He said I needed to take over for your own good. And I believed him. Her guilt hit me harder than her confession. Alyssa, I said gently, you made mistakes, but you're trying to fix them now. That's what matters. There was a pause. Then, Mom, what should I do with the folder? I hid it in my bag before I left. You still have it? Yes. I exhaled slowly. That folder wasn't just evidence, it was leverage. Proof of Evan's intent, his manipulation, and the extent of his scheme. It could legally dismantle him. And protect Alyssa forever. Don't let it leave your side, I told her. Keep it hidden. And stay somewhere safe until morning. I'll handle the rest with Mr. Callahan. A hotel lobby? She asked. Or police station? Police station, I said. They won't turn you away if you feel unsafe. She hesitated. Mom. Evan's going to come looking for me. I know, I replied. But this time, you won't be alone. My voice didn't shake. Not anymore. And for the first time in months, I felt Richard's strength settle into my bones. We finally had the truth. Now it was time to use it. But Evan isn't done. He makes a desperate move that forces Marianne to reveal a secret she has kept hidden even from Alyssa. Sleep didn't come for me that night. I stayed awake on the living room couch, waiting for any sign from Alyssa, replaying her trembling voice and the words that had shattered everything I believed about her marriage. Guardianship. Manipulation. A plan built around my downfall. Evan hadn't just been greedy, he had been calculating. And he had nearly succeeded. A little after sunrise, Alyssa finally texted. At the police station. Safe. Evan hasn't found me. Relief rushed through me, but it lasted only a moment. Because 10 minutes later, my doorbell rang. Not the aggressive knock from last night. Not the polite chime of a visitor. A steady, purposeful ring. When I opened the door, 3 people stood on my porch. 2 officers, and Evan. He looked disheveled this time, eyes bloodshot, hair messy, shirt wrinkled as if he had been up all night searching for Alyssa. But his expression was calm. Too calm. Mrs. Brooks, one officer said, we received a report of an attempted fraudulent freeze on family accounts. Mr. Hale claims you illegally restricted marital assets belonging to your daughter and son-in-law. Evan raised an eyebrow, his lips twitching with smug confidence. I stared at the officers, completely still. He wasn't stopping. He wasn't giving up. He was escalating. Officers, I said quietly, I have no idea what Evan has told you, but I have documents proving every asset he tried to access belongs solely to me. My husband arranged all of this legally years ago. We'll need to see that documentation, the second officer replied. Inside, my heart pounded as if it wanted to break free. Not because I feared the officers, but because I knew Evan wasn't here to argue about assets. He was here because he realized something. Alyssa had escaped. And she had the folder. I stepped aside and let the officers inside. Evan followed, hovering near the doorway like a shadow waiting for an opportunity. Where is Alyssa? He asked coldly. She's safe, I replied. He narrowed his eyes. She has something of mine. No, I corrected, she has something of yours that was never meant to exist. That rattled him. I motioned for the officers to follow me to the study where Richard's envelope and documents still lay. As they reviewed everything, Evan paced the room like a trapped animal. You think you've won? He muttered under his breath. You think Alyssa will choose you over her husband? Not if her husband treats her like property, I replied. He smirked. You're one to talk. And then he said something so sharp, so unexpected, it pierced straight through the shield I had built around my grief. Funny how you talk about trust, he sneered. When you never even told Alyssa the whole truth about Richard. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. What truth? I asked carefully. Evan's smile widened, not warm, not confident. Predatory. The life insurance policy, he said. The one she never knew existed. The reason you weren't left destitute. The reason you could afford to live quietly while pretending to be helpless. A cold wave swept over me. How do you know about that? I asked quietly. He shrugged. I saw the paperwork months ago. Richard wasn't as organized as he thought. That was a lie. Richard was meticulous. Which meant something worse. Evan had snooped. He had searched. He had dug through my late husband's private documents long before the property sales. Alyssa didn't know about the policy. Richard had asked me not to tell her, not until she became responsible enough to understand the value of protection. It wasn't a secret meant to deceive her, it was a safety net. But now, Evan weaponized it. "See," he taunted. "You're not the innocent victim. You've been hiding things too." One of the officers glanced at me, waiting to see my reaction. And in that moment, I made a decision I never expected to make. "Fine," I said softly. "Then I'll tell the truth. All of it." Evan's smirk slipped. Because he knew. When a mother stops hiding, she starts fighting. Marianne is finally ready to reveal the truth, but what she confesses next will change Alyssa's understanding of her father forever. The officers continued reviewing the documents spread across my desk, but their presence faded into a muted background hum. My mind was focused on the truth I had avoided for years, not because it was shameful, but because it was painful. Evan stepped closer, sensing he had forced me into a corner. "So," he prodded. "You going to tell them? Or should I?" I met his eyes steadily. "I'll speak." The officers turned toward me, waiting. I took a slow breath, steadying myself the way Richard used to when he was about to give difficult news. "Alyssa doesn't know about Richard's policy," I began. "Because he asked me not to tell her." "Not yet." "Why would he hide money from his own daughter?" Evan demanded, voice dripping with false outrage. "He didn't hide it," I corrected. "He protected it." One of the officers nodded thoughtfully, encouraging me to continue. I lowered myself into the chair, my fingers tracing the wooden armrest as memories surfaced, old, tender, bittersweet. When Alyssa was younger, she went through a rebellious phase. Not unusual. But it was severe. She trusted the wrong people, spent money recklessly, and allowed others to influence her decisions. Richard was deeply worried. The officers listened carefully. Evan crossed his arms, annoyed but attentive. Richard believed she would mature, I continued softly, and she did in many ways. But he also knew that if something ever happened to him, Alyssa would be vulnerable to people who might take advantage of her. I looked directly at Evan. And he was right. Evan's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. "So," I said, "Richard created a safety plan. He moved assets into my name. He arranged backup accounts, including the life insurance payout. He told me, Marianne, don't burden her with this responsibility until she understands the weight of it." A lump formed in my throat. I didn't tell Alyssa not because I wanted control, but because Richard trusted me to protect her until she was ready. The room went silent. The officers exchanged a glance, one of understanding. But Evan looked furious. "That's a convenient story," he spat. "You expect them to believe you hid an entire payout just to protect your adult daughter?" I tilted my head slightly. "Yes. Because it's the truth." He opened his mouth to argue, but the older officer raised a hand. "Mr. Hale," the officer said firmly, "based on the documents Mrs. Brooks has provided, and the evidence she submitted through her attorney, everything appears legally sound. These accounts and properties were never yours or your wife's. The freeze was well within her rights." Evan's eyes widened. "And furthermore," the officer added sharply, "your accusations may qualify as harassment and intentional misrepresentation." That shut him up. But I wasn't finished. "I have one more thing to confess," I said quietly. Both officers looked at me. Evan tensed. "When Richard was sick," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "he wrote a letter for Alyssa. One she's never read. One I couldn't bring myself to give her while she was still grieving." Evan's expression flickered with alarm. "He left instructions," I continued. "For her. For me. For our family. He warned that someone might come into her life who would try to control her through love, guilt, or manipulation." I didn't take my eyes off Evan as I spoke. He described that person in detail. Evan's face drained of color. "And every word," I finished softly, "matches you." Silence overtook the room. the officers had heard enough. Evan's breathing grew unsteady, his confidence collapsing one piece at a time. He realized now that every weapon he had tried to use against me, emotion, deceit, intimidation, was gone. But the real blow wasn't mine to deliver. It was Alyssa's. And she was on her way home. When Alyssa finally returns, she uncovers her father's letter, and learns the truth about Evan through his own words. But Evan has one last desperate move left. Alyssa arrived back in the country 2 days later, escorted by a quiet, kind officer who had taken her statement overseas. When she walked through my doorway, she looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but emotionally. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes swollen from crying, her hands gripping the worn strap of her purse like an anchor. "Mom," she whispered. I didn't wait. I wrapped my arms around her, and she clung to me with the force of someone who hadn't felt safe in far too long. "It's okay," I murmured, smoothing her hair like I used to when she'd fall from her bike. "You're home." She exhaled shakily into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry." "We'll talk," I said gently. "But first, you need rest." But Alyssa shook her head. "No. I need the truth." She wasn't the naive girl who had hung up on me weeks ago. She wasn't the confident woman who had believed Evan's every word. She was broken open. And ready to see what she had refused to look at before. "I want to read Dad's letter," she said quietly. I hesitated. My heart squeezed painfully. That letter, Richard's last words to her, was something I had guarded fiercely, unsure when she'd be ready for it. But now, maybe the timing was exactly right. I retrieved it from the safe Richard had installed behind the framed photo of our 25th anniversary. Alyssa held the envelope with trembling fingers. She stared at it as if it were a living thing. Then, slowly, she opened it. Richard's handwriting filled the page, steady, elegant, careful, just like he had been. Alyssa swallowed hard and began reading aloud. "My sweet Alyssa. If you're seeing this, it means life has tested you in ways you weren't prepared for. I want you to remember something: good people can be fooled by charming faces. And love, true or false, can blind us all. One day, someone may enter your life who wants more from you than your heart. Someone who sees your vulnerability as an opportunity. If that day comes, look closely at their actions, not their promises." Alyssa stopped, her breath stuttering. Tears began dripping onto the paper. She continued, voice cracking. "Your mother is stronger than you realize. She sees things you overlook. And she will protect you even when you think you don't need protection. Trust her. She is the shield I leave behind when I'm gone." Alyssa pressed the letter to her chest, sobbing openly now. "I didn't trust you," she whispered, voice shaking. "I trusted Evan instead. I let him tell me you were weak, and Dad knew all along." I pulled her into my arms. "You weren't weak. You were in love. And he used that against you." She cried harder, years of guilt, confusion, and heartbreak spilling out all at once. When she finally calmed, she wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve. "I want to talk to Evan," she said suddenly. "Alyssa." "No. I need to see who he really is. Without the charm. Without the excuses. Without the lies." I hesitated. "He's dangerous when cornered." She lifted her chin. "Then I won't be alone." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw a strength in her that reminded me of Richard. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "You think you've won. You haven't. Bring Alyssa. We need to talk. Both of you." A chill ran through me. Alyssa read it over my shoulder. Her expression hardened. "That's him," she whispered. "He knows I'm back." And then she said something that sent a ripple through my chest. "Mom. I'm not running anymore." I nodded slowly. Because neither was I. Evan wanted a confrontation? He was finally going to get one. But when Marianne and Alyssa meet Evan face to face, he reveals a dangerous plan that forces Alyssa to choose between her past and her future. Evan chose the meeting place carefully, too carefully. A public location, but isolated. Familiar, but unsettling. Willow Pier. The same quiet boardwalk where Richard used to take Alyssa for ice cream when she was little. The same wooden planks that creaked under our footsteps every summer for 20 years. When Alyssa and I arrived, the wind off the water was sharp, carrying the scent of lake mist and old memories. Early morning sunlight glinted across the waves, turning everything golden. Evan stood at the end of the pier, leaning against the railing as if he owned the scenery. He didn't look panicked anymore. He looked controlled. Too controlled. Alyssa tightened her grip on the folder in her bag, the folder containing every piece of evidence he never meant for us to see. "Stay behind me," I whispered. But she stepped forward instead. "No," she said softly. "I need to face him." I swallowed hard. She wasn't the fragile woman who had left for Europe. She was still hurting, but she was no longer blinded. We approached slowly. Evan turned his head, his eyes landing on Alyssa with dangerous calm. "Well," he said dryly, "the prodigal daughter returns." Alyssa didn't flinch. "Stop pretending you're the injured one here, Evan." He smiled, an icy, unsettling curve of his lips. "I'm not pretending. Your mother has turned you against me with her stories, her lies." I stepped forward. "Enough. The officers reviewed everything. You know the law isn't on your side." "Law," he repeated, scoffing. "The law doesn't care about broken families. The law cares about appearances. And right now, I look like the devoted husband whose mother-in-law stole his assets." His eyes flicked back to Alyssa. "And you look like a confused little girl manipulated by her grieving mother." The words should have shattered her. They didn't. Alyssa's voice was quiet, steady. "I read the letter Dad wrote." Something flickered across Evan's face, annoyance, maybe fear. "Of course she gave you that. Perfect timing, right?" Pulling out the dead father card. Alyssa's hands tightened at her sides. "Dad didn't warn me about you. He described you." Evan's jaw ticked. "And," she continued, reaching into her bag, "I found your folder." He froze. You didn't have to be a mind reader to see the shift in his posture, shoulders stiffening, eyes widening just slightly, feet planting firmer on the wooden boards. "You have no idea what you're holding," he said, voice turning low and dangerous. "I know exactly what it is," she replied. "Evidence." He stepped closer, tone sharpening. "That folder was part of a long-term plan. A future. A strategy. You don't just get to walk away with pieces of it." I moved in front of Alyssa. "She doesn't need your permission." "Not anymore." His expression twisted, the calm facade cracking. "You think you two can ruin me? After everything I invested?" His voice rose, echoing off the water. "Do you understand what I gave up for this family?" "You didn't give up anything," Alyssa said firmly. "You were waiting to take." Evan finally snapped. "You're nothing without me," he shouted. A group of early joggers turned their heads. Evan noticed, and his voice lowered, but his anger sharpened. "You leave me," he hissed, "and you walk away from your entire future." Alyssa stepped forward, her voice steady. "I'm not walking away from my future. I'm choosing it." Evan blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, "I'm filing for annulment. Today." Silence. The wind rustled through the willow trees. The boards beneath us creaked gently. Evan looked stunned, not because of the annulment, but because Alyssa delivered the blow without trembling. "You'll regret this," he whispered. "Maybe," she said. "But at least it will be my mistake, not yours." Evan stared at her for a long moment, then at me. But something in his expression shifted, not just anger, defeat. And with that, he turned and walked away down the pier. Not victorious. Not threatening. just small. But Marianne knows this isn't over, not until Evan's entire scheme is dismantled. I always believed justice moved slowly, but when the truth is undeniable, sometimes it arrives like a tidal wave. A week after the confrontation at Willow Pier, Alyssa and I walked side by side into the courthouse. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, her expression calm but resolute. For the first time in a long time, she didn't seem like a girl searching for direction. She looked like a woman reclaiming her life. Mr. Callahan met us in the hallway, carrying a thick binder labeled Hale Investigation. He nodded respectfully. "Are you ready?" he asked Alyssa. She inhaled deeply. "Yes. I'm ready to be done with him." Evan arrived moments later, surrounded by a lawyer who looked confident but impatient, exactly the kind of attorney who thrived on theatrics. Evan avoided making eye contact with Alyssa, but when his gaze crossed mine, I saw the resentment burning behind his stare. Not regret. Not remorse. Just bitterness. The hearing began with routine proceedings, name, marriage details, timeline. But as soon as evidence came into play, the entire courtroom shifted. Mr. Callahan stood tall, flipping open the binder. "Your Honor," he began, "we'd like to submit documented evidence of Mr. Hale's intent to manipulate, control, and defraud both his wife and her mother." He placed the folder, Alyssa's folder, on the judge's bench. Every head turned. Inside were Evan's handwritten notes, forged drafts, guardianship attempts, property transfer plans, even emails he had saved to himself under coded subject lines. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Hale, do you wish to explain these?" Evan's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, these documents are incomplete, taken out of context. They prove nothing." But the judge cut him off. "The handwriting matches Mr. Hale's signature on official filings. The content implies premeditated manipulation." Alyssa lifted her chin. "Your Honor, he convinced me that my mother was incapable. He told me selling her assets was a kindness." Evan's lawyer scoffed. "She's an adult. She made choices." But Alyssa wasn't intimidated. "Not anymore. I made choices because he lied," she said firmly. "He analyzed my weaknesses. He planned ways to control my mother through paperwork. He used my grief to distance me from her. And he did it while pretending he loved me." Evan slammed his hand on the table. "You wanted the life I gave you." A murmur spread across the courtroom. Alyssa didn't even blink. "No, Evan. I wanted the life you promised. Not the one you intended to trap us in." For a moment, the courtroom fell silent. Seeing Alyssa hold herself with such clarity made something inside me tremble. Pride, grief, relief, all tangled together. Mr. Callahan continued calmly, "Your Honor, we request an immediate annulment based on fraud and coercion." The judge leaned back, studying the evidence, then the two of them. Finally, she spoke. "Annulment granted." Alyssa sucked in a shaky breath. Evan's face drained of color. The judge wasn't finished. "As for Mr. Hale," she continued, "the court advises the district attorney to review this folder for potential charges of financial coercion, attempted fraud, and intentional misrepresentation." The room stirred with whispers. Evan's lawyer placed a hand on his arm, urging him to stay quiet, but Evan shrugged him off, glaring at Alyssa with unmasked fury. "This isn't over," he hissed. But for the first time, it sounded empty. Powerless. Alyssa stood slowly. "Yes, Evan," she said softly, "it is." When we walked out of the courthouse, sunlight spilled across the steps, warm and bright. Alyssa reached for my hand, a small gesture, but one that felt like an entire lifetime in the making. "Mom," she whispered. "Yes, sweetheart? Thank you, for fighting even when I didn't deserve it." I squeezed her hand gently. A mother protects. Even when her child doesn't understand. But deep inside, I knew the fight wasn't just mine anymore. Alyssa was finally fighting for herself. And soon, she would face the final choice Richard had hoped she'd one day understand. Now that Evan is gone, Marianne must help Alyssa rebuild, but a surprising discovery in Richard's final files changes their future forever. The weeks after the annulment passed like a slow exhale. For the first time in a long while, the house felt peaceful, not empty, not lonely, but healing. Alyssa stayed with me, sleeping in her old room, the one still painted in soft lavender tones from her teenage years. The first few days, she barely spoke. Grief had layers, and she was peeling back each one: guilt, regret, shock. I didn't rush her. I simply made tea, sat beside her, and let her rediscover silence without fear. One morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, she came down the stairs holding one of Richard's old storage boxes. "Mom," she said gently, "I want to help you sort through Dad's things. I think it's time." I nodded, swallowing the lump rising in my throat. "I think so too." We carried the boxes into the living room and spread everything across the carpet. Old photographs. Receipts from our first home. Letters Richard wrote me during business trips. Alyssa smiled softly, touching pieces of the father she lost too soon. Then she paused, pulling out a small black notebook with Richard's initials embossed in gold. "What's this?" she asked. My heart quickened. His planning journal. Alyssa opened it carefully. Inside were lists, notes, sketches, Richard's thoughts, captured in neat handwriting. A locksmith's bill. A reminder to change garden lights. Medical notes. Birthday ideas. And then, a page that made both of us freeze. Contingency plan, for Marianne and Alyssa. Beneath it, Richard had written, "If something happens to me, and Marianne is ever made vulnerable by outside influence, this plan activates." Alyssa looked at me, eyes wide. "Mom, he planned everything." I nodded quietly. "Your father was a strategist in his own way." She continued reading. "Ensure Marianne retains full ownership. Ensure Alyssa is protected. Ensure neither are ever financially controlled by another person." Alyssa pressed her hand against her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew I might trust the wrong person. He knew someone could take advantage of how much I love, how much I believe people." "He didn't think you were weak," I told her gently. "He thought you had a big heart. And big hearts sometimes attract small people." She sobbed, collapsing into my arms. I held her tightly, feeling her grief, her relief, her transformation. When she finally steadied, she wiped her eyes and turned the page. There, tucked in the back flap, was a sealed envelope. Alyssa hesitated. "It has your name on it." My breath caught. I hadn't seen it before, I didn't even know it existed. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Richard's final note. "My love. If you're reading this, then you faced a battle I feared but hoped would never come. Please remember this: you are not a woman who survives. You are a woman who overcomes." I've left something for Alyssa too. When the time is right, give her the blue envelope in the safe. It belongs to her future. Take care of each other. R. Alyssa leaned closer. The blue envelope. I stood and walked to the safe. Behind the important documents, untouched for years, was a blue envelope sealed with wax. I handed it to Alyssa. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a check made out to her name. A deed to a small starter home Richard bought in secret before he passed. And one final line in his handwriting. "For your new beginning. Choose wisely, my girl." Alyssa burst into tears, this time not from pain, but gratitude, love, and renewed hope. She hugged me tightly. "Mom. I don't deserve this." I held her face gently. "You do. Because you learned. You grew. And you didn't let darkness change who you are." We sat together on the couch, the sun warm against our shoulders, Richard's words wrapped around us like a final embrace. For the first time in years, our family felt whole again. If you enjoyed this emotional journey of strength, betrayal, and redemption, Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who loves powerful storytelling. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life.